What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer. Following the latest official Overwatch 2 update, we've gotten even more information regarding the Overwatch sequel from the Overwatch League pro players who actually got to play and test out the current iteration of Overwatch 2's PvP. These changes include previously unannounced nerfs to support heroes, feedback on how it feels to play a solo tank hero in the new 5v5 format, as well as some pretty hot takes on the new Bastian and Sombra reworks. But real quick, before I delve into all the new details we've learned, I would like to remind you to subscribe and hit up that bell icon to never miss out on any future Overwatch and Overwatch 2 news and content. But now let's take a look at some more new details regarding Overwatch 2. Now, the bulk of the information I'm going to be covering in this video today comes from Overwatch pro player Super, who is a player for San Francisco Shock, and yesterday he did a live stream where he talked pretty extensively about his experience getting to play Overwatch 2. Now, the live stream itself is pretty long, but Captain Beer and Blue2180 on Reddit were kind enough to summarize and list points of all the important things he touched on during the stream. So I'm going to read through all the major points he addressed and giving my feedback on his feedback to playing Overwatch 2. Now, I will also mention preemptively that everything discussed here should be taken with a grain of salt, as while the pro players did get to play the early version of Overwatch 2, it should be noted that despite them being professional players, they only had a limited amount of time to play around with and test out these new hero changes, and also the version of Overwatch 2 they played is in an alpha state at best, so there's by no means any guarantee that any of the things they talk about here are set in stone for the final release of the sequel. Now, that being said, let's jump on into the things Super had to say regarding Overwatch 2. First up, Mei's gun no longer freezes enemies, which is something we knew from a previous presentation, but her gun does 90 damage. I'm assuming that means 90 damage per second, which is pretty intense, and evidently with Discord Orb, it melts people pretty quickly. Sombra, who of course just got her new Overwatch 2 rework, was pretty unanimously perceived as being broken by all the teams that played her, specifically when it comes to her being able to hack while stealthed, and the fact that she can start shooting faster after coming out of stealth, which in combination with her increased damage against hacked targets, made her evidently very effective at melting individual targets. Soldier apparently feels pretty good. Zarya is considered to be a trash pick with a 20-second cooldown if both of her bubbles are used at the same time. Mercy was evidently also perceived as being trash in that she now only heals 50 health per second, and while in combat has a healing debuff that reduces her healing output by 25%. Now, a quick note on this was something which Super specified very specifically in his live stream, which is that support heroes across the board heal 25% less when healing a target who's taken damage within the past 4 seconds. This is a change which I definitely would like to talk more about in just a second, but first I'd like to get through this first set of points that Super mentioned in the live stream. D.Va felt okay to play, but in general, tanks felt weird. Rein also felt okay to play, but his Fire Strike was nerfed from dealing 100 damage to only 90 damage, which specifically meant he could no longer one-shot 200 HP heroes through Baptiste's amplification matrix. Zen is evidently really good, and Discord in combination with Hack apparently allows enemies to take crazy amounts of damage. Ana's Sleep Dart cooldown was increased to 15 seconds, Brigitte's Shield Bash no longer stuns, but does 40 damage, and overall, the new push game mode, which they played on the Rome map, feels a lot like Team Deathmatch. Overall, Super mentioned that he was underwhelmed by Overwatch 2 and that the game felt rather clunky, but acknowledged that it's still more than likely in an alpha state, and then also commented that they added a red border to your screen whenever you take damage, which was a little visual detail he didn't care for. Now, I'll be delving more with my personal thoughts into some of the bigger points here towards the end of this video, but there was another set of statements made by Super during his live stream, which I would like to cover first. So, moving on to the second set of points from this stream though, Sigma, Orisa, McCree, Doomfist, and Moira were all disabled during the playtest, which is presumably due to them being reworked. Some of these heroes we already knew for sure were going to be getting reworks, specifically Doomfist and Orisa, with the other ones having been sort of hinted at getting reworks, so it definitely makes sense that these 5 were excluded from the playtest. Winston's new right-click ability felt good, and felt much like a railgun from Quake, in that it needs to be aimed mentioned, has a 25-meter range and does 50 damage at full charge. Also, like Symmetra's right click, after keeping it at a full charge for 1 second, it'll automatically fire off. This allowed you to do a 130 damage burst combo if you were able to land your right click, melee, and jump combo all at the same time. Bastian, who was the other hero who got significantly reworked, felt fun to play, but was underwhelming, maybe even being worse than he is now. Specifically, the reasons for this were mentioned as being the fact that he moves at 50% speed while in turret form, and his bullets apparently only did 34% damage, despite the fact that the official stats for his rework stated that he should be doing 60% damage, in comparison to live Bastian, of course. So there's a bit of an inconsistency here in terms of the numbers. Perhaps this is something that was tweaked last minute, and thus was inconsistent between the official announcement and what the pros actually got to playtest, but nonetheless, the result was doing less damage in turret form than you do now, which apparently made him feel somewhat weak. His ultimate, though, felt fun, but apparently his primary fire feels really bad to shoot, in that the high rate of fire has been reduced, and thus it doesn't feel consistent with the good machine gun rapid fire feel that we currently have with the Overwatch 1 version of Bastion. And then, as I stated earlier in the video, 25% less healing when in combat and 4 seconds afterwards, with any damage putting you into combat. Even if a single D.Va pellet happens to hit you and does 0.4 damage from across the map, that'll count as being in combat, and thus you'll suffer from reduced healing. The power levels of each role evidently go DPS, followed very far behind by healers, and then tanks, which overall evidently doesn't feel too good. The reason specified for this is that healers are literally weaker in Overwatch 2, and only having the one tank makes whoever that tank player is have to take the brunt of the impact. The best support lineups he saw were Zenyatta plus Ana, or Zenyatta plus Baptiste, but maybe sometimes Lucio and Ana for dive comps, given that Moira was disabled. Mercy, as stated earlier, evidently felt useless, and Brig was just weird. Super also got the impression that Blizzard is trying to move away from a team-oriented MOBA game to more of an individual aim game. He played 7 games of Overwatch 2, and it felt more like Deathmatch than Overwatch 1 does. And lastly, it felt like charging your ultimate took longer than it does on live servers. Alright, so having covered all these big points, there are a number of follow-up things I'd like to mention regarding it. First and foremost, as I mentioned at the beginning, I would take any feedback he has with a grain of salt, specifically when it comes to things like the Sombra and Bastion reworks, as not only are they very new iterations of heroes that the pro players have to get used to playing, but also I'm sure there will be a plethora of tweaking going on when it comes to these heroes and their individual abilities and numbers and different stats between now and whenever Overwatch 2 ends up releasing. So even if Sombra during this playtest felt very brokenly overpowered, and Bastion felt fun but underwhelming, those are things which we could very easily end up seeing change or get adjusted as time goes on and the game continues being developed. Needless to say, I think this also applies to most aspects he talked about. The fact that tank heroes only felt okay to play with the single tank hero as opposed to the 2 tanks in Overwatch 1, in addition to the power levels of each of the separate roles. These are all things which I expect to fluctuate quite a bit, and whatever it is that we as the general public end up getting to play once the beta comes out or even the official release of the game, it's likely going to be significantly different from what they played just recently. The healing nerf is definitely something I want to address specifically as well. I do find it rather odd that evidently this was an unannounced change. They just sort of slipped into the playtest without publicly acknowledging it. To me, this indicates that it could be a highly experimental change they're going with, and they're not set in stone with this change at all whatsoever at this point, and thus they didn't want to make a big deal about it and get people complaining on the forums about all the nerfed support heroes, but at the same time they maybe wanted to test it with the pros just because it was something they wanted to get feedback on. And that turns out to be exactly what this is. As I was about to finish editing this video, this post by Overwatch community manager Andy B was posted on the Overwatch forums, stating that the global healing debuff was in fact a special change they were experimenting with, and specifically in the words of Overwatch hero designer Jeff Goodman, it's unlikely to make it through to live game as it is now. So certainly there's no cause for concern at this point, since clearly it's something they're still iterating on. Personally, in concept, I'm actually not really against the idea of support heroes healing less while in combat. I think in the current Overwatch 1, healing during active combat is kind of overpowered in certain ways, so I definitely at the very least like that Blizzard is looking into finding ways of tweaking and maybe improving the healing mechanics of Overwatch with the sequel. But according to the pro players, it sounds like it doesn't feel very good in the current iteration of Overwatch 2, so hopefully it's something they will be considering and adjusting as time goes on, and hopefully find a better fit for how to have this mechanic work. And overall, I think the big thing to keep in mind about the entire playtest in general is that the entire purpose of having the pros playtest Overwatch 2 in this early state is specifically so that the devs can get feedback like this. All these critiques and criticisms and complaints about the things in the Overwatch 2 build which they didn't like, and even things they did like, are all useful for the devs going forward in finer tuning the game. So the fact that there are maybe mechanics or different aspects of the current build that aren't super great isn't really a big cause for concern in my opinion, because the game, as I said, is going to be changing a lot through development, and this is essentially just a snapshot of where they are currently in the development process. I'm very curious to see how the devs end up receiving this feedback and what sort of changes they end up making based on it, but for the time being, it's very interesting to get to hear the pros give their own personal perspectives like this, and the feedback based on the game we've been waiting years to play at this point. I of course still have my fingers crossed that Overwatch 2 is going to be a very fun sequel, hopefully even more fun than Overwatch 1, and I'm not dismayed whatsoever at the moment by the criticism the pros have been dishing out, just because, again, things are going to change a lot by the time we actually get to play it ourselves. But definitely let me know your thoughts on all these points by dropping a comment down below. I will include a link down in the description to the Reddit post where these points were archived, as well as the live stream itself in case you're interested in checking either of those out. And otherwise, let me know your thoughts on these changes by dropping a comment down below. Are you a bit worried given the feedback some of the pro players have about Overwatch 2? Or are you excited that things are just going to be changing up quite a bit with the sequel? Either way, be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe, follow me on Twitter, hit up that bell icon, and come join my Discord server to hang out and never miss any future Overwatch content. Special thanks to my YouTube channel members who help make these videos possible, and if you'd like to join them to earn some cool rewards, then just hit that join button down below. Otherwise, this is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.